I'm going to start on a rather somber note. I hope it'll end up being a liberating reflection, but you'll have to judge. GDP is slowing all over the world, everywhere. And the reason is productivity has been declining all over the world, everywhere for 20 years. The result, unemployment's very high, especially among the young millennials here trying to find a place in the workforce in the 21st century. Our economists are projecting 20 more years of low productivity and slow growth. And let me do the math for you. After two industrial revolutions in the 19th and 20th century, it's fair to say the following. Half the human race, we are far better off today than our ancestors were before we began this industrial experiment. Is that granted? It's also fair to say that 40% of the human race, making $2 a day or $1 a day, are appreciably no better off, and maybe worse off in some cases, than before we began the industrial age. And while half the human race has done better, the other half of the human race not so well. The very wealthy among us, they've really done well. The 8 richest people in the world today, we could put them in this role, the 8 richest people on this planet today, their combined wealth now equals the accumulated wealth of 1/2 the human population living on Earth. That's 3.5 billion people. There's something really dysfunctional about the way the human family is organizing itself on this planet. It's clear we're in a long-term economic crisis. It's structural. But now this economic crisis has given rise to a far more profound crisis, an environmental crisis. We are in real-time climate change. This is no longer a theory. It's no longer a model. It's no longer looming on the horizon. Climate change is at the house. It's in the door. We have spewed massive amounts of carbon dioxide, methane, nitrous oxide into the atmosphere of this planet to make the industrial way of life. Now we're paying the entropy bill. What's frightening about climate change, and what I'm about to describe is never talked about. If we really understood what climate change does, the entire human race would be on the same mission for 3 generations to save our species, to save our fellow creatures, and to save the planet. So I'm going to tell you, and you spread the word. Climate change changes the water cycles of the Earth. It's never described. We're the watery planet. Our ecosystems have developed over millions of years based on the water cycles and the cloud covers that traverse our ecosystems around the Earth. Here's the rub. For every 1 degree that the temperature goes up on this Earth because of CO2 emissions and methane and nitrous oxide into the atmosphere, and those molecules block the sun's heat from getting off the Earth, so for every 1 degree the temperature goes up on this Earth from CO2 emissions, the atmosphere is sucking up 7% more precipitation from the ground because the heat is forcing the precipitation into the clouds. So we're getting more concentrated precipitation in those clouds. That's why they're starting to look so big. And we're getting more violent, extreme water events across the ecosystems of the planet. More blockbuster winter snows. We had 8 feet in Boston last season. That's the new normal. More extreme spring flooding around the world. We had floods in the Carolinas last year. They say this happens once every 1,000 years. We've had 4 of them in the last 2 years. More prolonged summer droughts. All of the west coast of the United States, from British Columbia to California, on fire from the droughts last summer. More Category 3, 4, and 5 hurricanes. That hurricane that hit the Philippines last year, the most powerful in history, that is the new normal. And now our scientists are talking about storms unprecedented that we've never seen in all of history in the next 8 decades. Many of you will be for this. It's going to devastate, and already is, infrastructures. We're already having people die. We have mass refugees moving out of parts of the planet. The reason those Syrian refugees left is they had 128 degrees Fahrenheit temperature. They can't live there anymore in Syria and parts of the Middle East. They're moving toward Europe. Our ecosystems cannot catch up to the runaway water cycles, and they are collapsing. Those water cycles are on an exponential curve, and I want you to hear this. If you're a young millennial or a parent or grandparent here, our scientists tell us that we are now in the 6th extinction event of life on Earth, real time. We've had 5 mass extinction events in 450 million years on this planet before humans were here. And each time, there was a tipping point in the chemistry of the planet and massive quick die-out. And each time, 10 million years to recover with new life. We're now in the 6th extinction event. We are chronicling it in real time. And our scientists tell us at current projections, we are going to lose half the species, advanced species on this planet in the next 8 decades. The last time this happened on that scale was 65 million years ago, and it occurred over thousands of years. We're talking in the lifetime of the young people and your children and grandchildren. This is the most important and powerful story the human family has ever faced, and it isn't even on the television or in the mass media or on Facebook. It's not there. As my wife says, we're not grasping the enormity of this moment. We are asleep. We acknowledge climate change. We do a little greenwashing, and back to business as usual. 99.5% of all the species that have ever been on this planet they've come and they've gone. Those are not good odds. We are the youngest species. Anatomically modern humans, here we are. We've been here 200,000 years. There is no guarantee we will make it over the next several centuries. So what do? We have an economic crisis, and now it's created an environmental crisis, real-time climate change, extinction event. We need a new economic vision for the world, and it needs to be compelling. We need a game plan to deploy that vision, and it needs to come quick. We have to be off carbon everywhere in both the developing world and industrial world in less than 4 decades. Off, everywhere, carbon. If we have any chance of escaping the abyss, because we're not going back to the way it used to be. We are in climate change for the next 1,000 years. But at least we may have hope to begin replenishing the planet and learning how to live here with each other and our fellow creatures in the future. So we got to step back for a moment and ask this question. How do the great economic paradigm shifts in history occur? If we know how they occur, we're going to get a compass and a roadmap here in Belgium, in the EU, and around the world that's going to allow everyone here today to navigate a new journey to save the planet. We've had at least 7 major economic paradigm shifts in history. They don't come very often. And what's interesting is they share a common denominator. That's why they're infrequent. And that is, at a moment of time, 3 technologies emerge and converge to create what we call in engineering a general purpose technology platform, an infrastructure that fundamentally changes the way we manage, power, and move economic life. Here are the 3 technologies. Number 1, new communication technologies to more efficiently manage our economic activity, and that's kind of apparent. Number 2, new sources of energy to more efficiently power our economic activity, also obvious. Number 3, new modes of mobility, transportation, logistics to more efficiently move our economic activity. So when communication technologies join with new sources of energy, new modes of mobility, it does change the way we manage, power, and move our economic and social life. It changes our spatial, temporal orientation. It changes our forms of governance. It changes our habitats. It even changes consciousness. 2 quick examples. 19th century, first industrial revolution, Britain. 20th century, second industrial revolution, the US. Belgium was there too in both those industrial revolutions at the get-go, early starters here. The Brits take us into the first industrial revolution with a communication revolution, steam power printing. No more manual print presses. Big leap forward in productivity, mass communication, cheap print. Then the Brits lay out a telegraph system in the last part of the 19th century, and steam power printing, the telegraph, those communication technologies allow us to manage a new source of energy in Britain called coal. They discovered coal. Then they harvested the coal with a British invention called the steam engine. Then, this is ingenious, they put the steam engine on rails, locomotives, national transport, urban industrial life, communication, energy, mobility, managed power, and moved the UK. 20th century, second industrial revolution in the United States. Centralized electricity, the telephone. I know everyone here thinks the internet is just the greatest thing ever. The telephone was a really big deal. Mass communication at the speed of light, cheap around the world. Later, radio and television. Those communication revolutions converge in the US with a new source of energy, cheap Texas oil. Then Henry Ford put everybody on the road with cars, buses, and trucks, the internal combustion engine. That second industrial revolution took the entire world through the 20th century, and it peaked in July 2008. It peaked. And that's when oil hit $147 a barrel on world markets, Brent crude oil. And that month, the entire global economy shut down all over the world. Silence. That was the economic earthquake. And the collapse of the financial markets 60 days later was the aftershock. We're still dealing with the aftershock. We haven't handled the earthquake. Why was it the earthquake? It wasn't just the beginning of the Great Recession. It was the beginning of the end of the second industrial revolution. The reason is everything we depend on in this civilization is based on oil. Our fertilizers and pesticides to grow food, they're made out of fossil fuels. Construction materials, they're made out of fossil fuels. Most of our pharmaceutical products, they're made out of fossil fuels. Our synthetic fiber, our power, our transport, heat and light, it's all fossil fuels. We built a whole civilization on digging up the burial grounds of the Carboniferous era and turning it into this industrial experiment. So when the price of oil starts to go over 90 a barrel, all the other prices go up. When oil hits around 115 or 20 a barrel, prices for everything from groceries in the store, our drugs that we get, our synthetic fiber, it all goes up and purchasing power starts to slow. So we are in a period now of growth shutdown, growth shutdown. Every time we regrow the inventories, oil prices go up, other prices go up. At 115 barrel, it slows down again. This is a sunset. And now the problem is wherever there's oil, we have failed states. All over the Middle East, failed states. This is an unpredictable, dangerous world. So where do we go from here? Let me share an anecdote. When Angela Merkel became Chancellor of Germany, she asked me to come to Berlin in the first few weeks of her new government to help her address the question of how to grow the German economy, German businesses, German jobs on her watch. When I got to Berlin, the very first question I asked this new chancellor, I said, Madam Chancellor, how do you grow the German economy when your businesses are plugged in to a second industrial revolution infrastructure of centralized telecommunications, fossil fuel nuclear power, internal combustion vehicles for road, rail, water, and air transport, and that platform, that infrastructure to manage power and move Germany peaked years and years and years ago. It's all about productivity. There's a big discussion going on among economists and public officials. Why is productivity declining when we have all these killer new digital products? We used to believe there are two factors that create productivity, and that is more capital for better machines and then better performing workers. But when Robert Solow won the Nobel Prize for economic growth theory in the mid-'80s, he let out a little secret economists don't want to talk about. It's so embarrassing. Those two factors, he said, better machines, better workers, that's only 14% of productivity. Where's the other 86% come from? Don't know. Does that surprise you? Economists don't know. Actually, there is a third factor in productivity that economists ignore because primarily engineers, chemists, biologists, and architects know about it because it's based on the laws of thermodynamics, the energy laws. The third factor in productivity is called aggregate efficiency. Aggregate efficiency is the ratio of potential work to the actual useful work that you get in any kind of business activity and what's wasted. All right? Let me give you an example. It works the same way in nature, the laws of energy. If a lion chases down an antelope in nature and kills it and devours it, only about 10 to 20% of all of the energy in that antelope, that energy gets into the lion. The rest is heat loss in the heat and the conversion. That's its aggregate efficiency. The ratio of potential work to the actual useful work when you've made the conversion. So here's what economics is all about. We take energy out of nature, and it can be a rare earth, which is a material form of energy. Every one of you have rare earths in your smartphone. It can be a rare earth, a metallic ore, a fossil fuel, and we take material and energy out of nature, so all of it's really energy, and we have to ship it and store it. We produce goods and services from things in nature, and we consume them. Then we recycle them back to nature. At every step of conversion on the value chain, from nature to society back to nature, we have to embed a certain amount of material and energy into that good or service to get it to the next stage of what it becomes, all right? But in the process, we lose some of the material and energy in the conversion. That's aggregate efficiency. What does this have to do with my conversation with the Chancellor of Germany? She's a physicist, and here's what I explained. We started the second industrial revolution in the United States at 3% aggregate efficiency. 97% of all the conversions across the business chain, we lost all of it, material and energy. By the 1990s, the US got up to about 14% aggregate efficiency. That was our ceiling. Nothing's changed. Germany got to 18.5% aggregate efficiency. 10 years later, nothing's changed. Japan led the world and got up to 20% aggregate efficiency on their value chains. Nothing's changed. Here's what I said to the Chancellor. This is important for everybody here in Belgium. I said, you can have market reforms, labor reforms, fiscal reforms, monetary reforms. You can incentivize 1 million Steve Jobs to create new businesses and it won't make a damn bit of difference. As long as your businesses are plugged in to a second industrial revolution platform of centralized communication, fossil fuel, nuclear power, internal combustion transport, because that platform peaked in its productivity over a decade ago. That's the problem. So on that first day with the Chancellor, we discussed a third industrial revolution, a new convergence of communication, energy, and transport to manage power and move economic life. And I want all the young millennials now to listen carefully to this, because this is your future. You're the digital generation. You're the internet generation. This is for you. This is for you. We are seeing a new convergence of communication, energy, and mobility across society. Everybody here has a smartphone this afternoon, correct? So the internet's here. It's well placed. We're all connected with each other in communication. It's digital. Now this digital communication internet is converging just now with a digital renewable energy internet, which in turn is converging with a digital automated, driverless, GPS, road, rail, water, and air internet to create 3 internets: communication internet, renewable energy internet, automated driverless transport internet to manage power and move society. These 3 internets ride on top of a platform called the Internet of Things. We're attaching sensors in all of our devices so they can monitor activity and send data to us. So we have sensors in the agricultural fields, the factories, smart homes, smart vehicles, smart roads, smart warehouses. They're beginning to send data in real time. By 2030, we're going to have ubiquitous interconnectivity. Every machine talking to all of us. Billions and trillions of these sensors. We're creating a global brain. This is a nervous system across the planet, and this nervous system is connected by something called Galileo in Europe and GPS in the US, satellites who are timers on outer space, and they're synchronizing all that big data so it can go through the system. That's the brain, the sensors are the nervous system. We're bringing together the human race. All of you here in this room, the young people, you're Skyping in global classrooms, right? You're on Facebook. That's the biggest fictional family in history. What, 1.5 billion of you? You're gaming and sporting up there with your millennial colleagues all over the world, right? You're connected. And what I'm suggesting here is that this Internet of Things third industrial revolution is going to allow the whole human race, starting with the millennials, to begin to directly engage each other in your economic and social and political life. And you can eliminate a lot of the middlemen. Those giant institutions that were the referees took some of the profit and kept you from each other, because it's going to be very cheap with your mobile technology to engage each other. This means a vast expansion of small and medium-sized enterprises because the entry fee is cheap and you can begin to engage each other all over the world. We call this glocalization, not globalization. Because globalization means you can start with your own region and you can be involved with anybody you want in the world. Start your own business. While this extension of democracy is a big leap forward, and it's the future of our journey, it comes with a big problem. And that is the dark net. The dark net's as impressive as the bright net. How do we engage, how do we ensure network neutrality? Everyone has equal access to this global brain. How do we ensure that governments don't purloin this for political purposes? This is already happening. You saw the hacking of the American elections by Russia. How do we ensure your privacy when everyone's connected? How do we ensure your data so that you can opt in and opt out? If you don't want your data being used by Google for some third party, you can say no. How do we ensure against cybercrime and cyber terrorism disrupting the system and collapsing it and taking it down? This is the dark net. And what I'm saying to you today is we're going to spend as much time on the dark net and building resilience into this system, or we won't get to the promised land with a bright net. This is the politics of the next 3 generations. This is the political movement starting with the millennials, your children and grandchildren. But let's assume right now, this afternoon, that we're going to be able to have a political movement so that we control our own destiny on this platform. And it's a big if, not guaranteed. Here's what the bright net gives us. Let's say you're a small business, a nonprofit, a local government. You can go up on this emerging Internet of Things platform right now, and you can start to get a transparent picture of all the data going through the system. This means you have an even playing field. Even big companies didn't have this data. That means anyone in this room, you can do your own startup, nonprofit, profit, whatever you like. And then you can take the data you care about that's flowing through the system, and let's say you have a startup, and you can take the data you care about for your value chain and cut it out from the rest of the data. Then you can mine that big data that you care about. Create your own analytics. Create your own apps. So you can dramatically increase your aggregate efficiency at every step of conversion on your value chain. And by doing that, dramatically increase your productivity, because that's what aggregate efficiency is about. Dramatically reduce your ecological footprint, because in every single conversion, you're getting more and losing less to waste. And when you do that, it allows you to become a player in this global economy. Everybody in this room can do this. Profit, nonprofit, local government, everybody. It's already starting. Some of the marginal cost, let me explain marginal costs. Fixed costs are the cost of putting something together. Marginal cost is then, once you put together, how much each unit costs. The marginal costs are plunging with digitalization. They're getting so low, the marginal cost, because of the digitalization of communication internet already, that companies are being forced into a massive disruption. They're moving from selling goods to managing services. They're moving from markets to networks. They're moving from ownership to access. They're moving from consumerism to sustainability. What this means is it's going to be too slow to be a seller and a buyer and an owner and a worker. We now have a new category called prosumers, and everyone in this room has done this. We got 3.5 billion people now on the internet, pretty soon the whole human race on the Internet of Things. China has a smartphone now for $25 with more power than sent our astronauts to the moon. So everybody's going to be involved. So how many of you in this room at any given time have produced your own music with a cheap little digital recorder and put it up on the web? Anybody? How many of you produce your own YouTube videos with a little cell phone, smartphone, and put it up on the web? YouTube. How many of you created your own news blogs or ebooks or contributed to Wikipedia and the knowledge of the world or taken a massive open online college course for credit? It's free. This means that what happens here is we can begin to, the marginal cost gets so low, they head to near zero marginal cost, meaning that everyone in the room with a cheap smartphone and a provider, power up, you can produce and share for free all sorts of virtual goods, videos and music and news blogs, and contribute to the knowledge of the world in Wikipedia and take college courses. Whole industries have been disrupted. Music industry, television, newspapers, magazines, book publishing, totally disrupted by this revolution. Thousands of new businesses have emerged, not just Google, Facebook, and Twitter. There are millennials all over the world now, and they're creating the new startups, profit and nonprofit. They're creating the connections, the platforms, the apps, the big data is being mined. This is what's happening. So what we've given birth to here with this digital revolution is what we call the sharing economy. How many of you have used car sharing? How many have used Airbnb or couch surfing? You're in it. This is the sharing economy. And capitalism gave birth to this little creature called the sharing economy. Nobody knew it was going to happen. But let me be clear, this sharing economy you're using, some of it's part of the capitalist system, part of it's separate. But this is the first new economic system to enter onto the world stage since capitalism and socialism in the 19th century. This is a remarkable event brought on by the digitalization of communication. We thought there'd be a firewall here. While we could understand zero marginal cost affecting virtual goods, your YouTube videos, your music, and all of that, we didn't think it would go to the physical world. What I'm saying in the Zero Marginal Cost Society, in that book, is the Internet of Things has broken the firewall. We now have across Europe, some of you will know some of these folks, who are producing their own solar and wind right now. How many know somebody that's producing their own solar and wind? Zero marginal cost. Not the fixed cost. The fixed costs are plummeting, and the marginal cost, the sun doesn't send a bill. The wind doesn't send a bill. So here's what's interesting. Let's go back to Germany. What's happened since my first conversation with the chancellor? We've been working there now for 10 years. 33% of our electricity, and watch Belgium because you're way behind. But you're going to go way ahead. I'm going to tell you this is going to happen in Belgium. You were a leader in the first and second industrial revolution, and we're going to start working in this region. You're going to start moving way ahead of the pack. I guarantee it. So what's interesting about this revolution is the fixed cost. You know, the solar and wind have been on an exponential curve for 20 years. You know what an exponential curve is? If I say to you, I'll give you $1 million, all right? Or I got plan B. If you don't take the million, I'll give you $1 and I'll double it every day for 30 days. Which one would you choose? Double it, because in 30 days it's off the map. It's billions and billions of dollars. $1, $2, $4, $8, 16, 32. Doesn't sound like much, right? By the time you get to the 20th day, you're in gravy. Computers were on an exponential curve. When I was a young kid in the 40s, we didn't even have computers. In the early 50s, we had a few. They cost millions of dollars. And the chairman of IBM at the time said, we will need 5 computers for the world. That was an optimistic forecast, 5 computers. Got that one wrong. What happened is Intel began to double the capacity on those little computer chips every 2 years. Now smartphone, $25. We're seeing the same thing with solar and wind. A solar fixed watt cost $78 to produce 1 little watt fixed cost in 1979. $78. You know what it is this afternoon? 53 cents. 35 cents in 18 months from now. And we now have power and utility companies in my global group that are buying, and I want all the mayors to hear this here, they're buying long-term 20-year contracts right now at 4 cents a kilowatt hour. And what's happening in the boardrooms of the power and transmission companies, I'm with those CEOs every month, is panic. Because we now have $100 trillion in stranded assets in the fossil fuel industry. It's over. Solar and wind are getting cheaper and cheaper, and the marginal costs are zero. Citibank came out with a report a year ago saying there's $100 trillion in stranded assets, the oil rigs, the pipelines, all the exploration rights. This is the largest bubble in history, and it's going to make the subprime mortgage, debacle of 2008 look like a little game. That's what's going on in the boardrooms right now. But what's interesting again is once you pay the fixed cost of that energy, the marginal cost is near zero. The sun and the wind don't send a bill. So what happens in Germany when their business is now, a third of their electricity is nearly free, and it's going to be 100% before 2040, and their businesses are plugging into a communication internet that then is digitalizing the electricity grid and energy internet, and their businesses are using near zero marginal cost energy in every single conversion of their business value chain. How does a second industrial revolution country compete with that? With coal, oil, gas, and nuclear. That's what's going on. So the disruption we saw in the virtual world with communication and entertainment and knowledge is now happening in energy. And guess who's producing all the new energy in Germany? People like you. Farmers, small businesses, neighborhood associations, SMEs, cooperatives. They created electricity cooperatives. They went to the banks. They all got loans. The banks were fine about it. They knew they'd pay back by the energy they were producing. Nobody was defaulted. They're producing all the energy. This is power to the people, literally and figuratively, power to the people. We have 4 major power companies in Germany. We thought they were invincible 10 years ago. EMBW, RWE, E.ON, and Vattenfall, these giant global institutions, we thought they'd be there forever. What happened to them in 10 years is what happened to the music industry and newspapers and book publishing and television. Everybody, small players, could do this cheaper and scale it. That's a revolution. Does this mean this is the end of the power and transmission companies? No, maybe not. Some of them are going out of business. But some will make the transition, and we introduced a new business model. About 5 years ago, I debated the president of E.ON, one of the 4 companies, and I said, look, you're not leaving the second industrial revolution tomorrow morning, but these are sunset. Fossil fuels and nuclears is gone. We're at 4 cents a kilowatt hour. It's going to go down to 3. You have to be both in the second industrial revolution, these are legacy energies, and amortize them out so you don't take the deep loss for civilization. I don't think we want to bail out these companies, do we, for $100 trillion? And I said, at the same time, you want to be in a new business, a third industrial revolution business, so you can make the new income to help you move to the next journey. And in the new business, if you're a transmission company for electricity, you make more and more money by selling less and less electricity. And he said, you have lost me. How do we make more money by selling less electricity? I said, you set up partnerships with thousands and thousands of businesses, and you help manage their energy internet. You help them manage the energy going through their business value chain when they have to manage power and move their business. You help them with their analytics, their big data. You help them with their apps so they can dramatically increase their aggregate efficiency and productivity, dramatically reduce their ecological footprint and marginal cost. And then all those thousands of businesses will share their productivity gains with you. The power company, it's called performance contracts. He said, we're not doing that. He did it 5 years late. This last year, E.ON sold off. They're on the market. They're fossil fuel nuclear, no buyers, stranded asset. And they're moving to energy services. RWE, the other one of the big 4, they just moved to energy services. ERDF and EDF provide a lot of energy for you guys up here. They've joined us in northern France. We're doing the build-out for all of industrial northern France. And they're not leaving nuclear power tomorrow, but they realize that the future is moving toward energy services with renewables. It's not just Europe, now China. When President Xi and Premier Li came in, Premier Li, I didn't know him, but he put out his biography, and I was quite surprised. He said he had read a book of mine, Third Industrial Revolution, in his biography, and instructed the central government of China to move on the narrative that I'm introducing to you this afternoon, the entire government. Boy, do they move fast. I've been shuttling back and forth with the leadership in China for 3 years, and to show you how fast they move, 11 weeks after my first visit with the Chinese leadership, they announced an $82 billion commitment to digitalize the electricity grid of China so that millions of Chinese people can produce their own solar and wind in their neighborhoods and communities and either off-grid use it or share it back to the national grid. That's just started. Watch Europe, watch China. The coming together of the communication internet with the renewable energy internet gives rise to the automated GPS, driverless road, rail, water, and air internet. How many of you have used car sharing? Car sharing services, that's all? That's it? About a third of the room. So apparently you've thrown a problem for us because we built the whole second industrial revolution around buying and owning automobiles. That's what it was all about. But millennials don't seem to want to own a car. That's grandma and grandpa, 2 cars, sitting in the driveway, doing nothing, waxing it once a month, sitting at the office, the car's doing nothing. Millennials want access to mobility in car sharing networks, not ownership of vehicles in traditional markets, correct? Well, we got a problem here. For every car that's shared, we're eliminating 15 cars. There's 1 billion cars, buses, and trucks in the world today. They're choking us in traffic. They're the #3 cause of global warming emissions. By the way, the #1 cause of global warming emissions is buildings, right? #3 is transport. Does anyone know what the #2 cause of climate change is? Because no one ever talks about it. Does anybody? What is it? Yeah, meat, cows. Well, very good. Meat and cows. Well, when I first suggested this in 1990, they said, Mr. Rifkin, you've gone off the deep end. We've got to put you away. The fact is there's 1.3 million cows, 1.3 billion cows in the world. They take up 27% of the land mass. I love cows, but the methane they produce is 23 times more potent than CO2 molecules. And their feces emits nitrous oxide, and it's 288 times more powerful than a molecule of CO2. But nobody wants to talk about this. I'm glad some of the young people got it. We got to move down the food chain so that we can save the planet, save our fellow creatures, and live a decent life on this earth. But #3 is transport. So a new study done by the former Vice President of General Motors suggests that in a middle-sized city, we're going to eliminate 80% of the vehicles. Globally, we're going to eliminate 800 million of those billion cars, buses, and trucks. The other 200 million vehicles, this is in your generation. They're going to be electric. They're going to be fuel cell driven. They're going to be made out of 3D printed recycled material that's already started. They're going to be driverless with zero marginal cost energy, all automated and autonomous. We're plunging the marginal cost. Does this mean the end of the transportation companies? Not necessarily. Some are going to go out of business, some aren't. I'm going to tell you about 2 really cool things. Last year, Daimler asked me if I would join them. They created the internal combustion engine, all right, the modern automobile. So Wolfgang Bernhard, their CEO, said, join me in Germany. We're going to bring journalists around the world here, and we're going to introduce them to a new business. Daimler is now in the business of the mobility internet, logistics. So I gave my talk, and then Wolfgang Bernhard dimmed the lights in the room for the journalists, and he went to a helicopter feed live on the German expressways, and there are 3 big Daimler trucks. And what he explained to everybody is Daimler had quietly put sensors on all of the outside of its trucks in the last 4 years. They're big data centers. There's 400,000. When you see a Daimler truck, they're all out there, 400,000 trucks with sensors. And they're going down the expressways, and they're picking up climate conditions, traffic flows, warehouse availability, and those data can then be used with analytics, so anybody that wants to ship something from A to B can use that data. Then this is what's really very cool. They went to the drivers in the trucks live, and the drivers are waving, and Wolfgang Bernhard said, take your hand off the wheel and your feet off the pedal. They did, and then they were software analysts, no longer drivers. They're looking at the computers to monitor the sensing of the data. Then the trucks came together in a platoon, automated. No drivers. This is a global, mobile, big data center across the German expressways. Smart, huh? New business. They're still going to make lots of trucks, but eventually they're going to make less trucks. They're going to go into the data business. Mark Fields, the CEO of Ford, asked me to join him at the beginning of the auto show in Detroit this January. We have a new film, Vice. How many young people know Vice Media? So we have a new film with Vice Media coming out. So Mark Field joined us, and he announced their new business, mobility internet services. This is the revolution. The coming together of these 3 internets, communication, energy, and transport on top of the Internet of Things, it is a revolution. But then the question is, how do we pay for this? We have all the money to pay for this tomorrow morning. When we developed our new journey in Europe, it's called Smart Europe. We announced it on February 7th, and the gentleman's in charge of it will be here in a half hour, Vice President Sefcovic, and he's in charge of the Energy Union, Smart Europe. He's also co-chair with former Mayor of New York, Michael Bloomberg, of all 7,000 cities that have to deal with climate change. So we announced Smart Europe, February 7th. He'll tell you more about it, so every region can start connecting. The question is, how do we pay for it? We've got all the money. For example, in 2012 in the EU, we spent 741 billion equivalent US dollars on infrastructure. That's just a lousy recession year, public and private infrastructure. The problem is where we spent it. We spent it on a second industrial revolution of centralized telecommunication, fossil fuel, nuclear power, internal combustion transport. That infrastructure peaked 15, 20 years ago. No more new businesses and jobs. So we said, let's reprioritize. We'll spend some of it patching up the bridges and roads. That's good. But let's prioritize it so that we put a lot of this revenue into a third industrial revolution infrastructure and let the regions do this. This has to go like Wi-Fi. Each region has to create their own roadmap, construction site, and then border with other regions like Wi-Fi and connect it laterally across Europe. So now we've got a kitty of 470 billion already put together from the EU. I'm hoping with the private equity we'll get it to $1 trillion infrastructure. It'll be the most impressive in the world within the next year. That's my wish list. And that means any region, like your region here in Flanders, you can go and put together an economic roadmap, a third industrial revolution infrastructure, bring together local government, your business community, your civil society, your high schools, your universities, do it jointly. You can apply for EU funds, and then you can leverage them against private equity and start tomorrow morning. Every industry is involved in this build-out. This is the jobs for the millennial generation. You're all digital. You're looking for all the jobs. The jobs is laying out this 40-year infrastructure across every field. We need ICT, consumer electronics. We need the power and transmission companies. We need logistics, transportation. We need construction, real estate, advanced manufacturing. They all lay out the infrastructure. Robots can't do this. AI doesn't do this. And this means millions of jobs. Here in Belgium, we have to take the entire energy infrastructure, fossil fuel, pipelines, nuclear, and we've got to transform that to renewables. And to do that, first we got to retrofit every building in this country because they're going to be the power plants. But you have to make them efficient, they leak. And unless you retrofit them, you can't turn them into power plants. Retrofitting every home, office, every industrial site, every agricultural farm, that's a huge amount of jobs. Robots don't put in insulation in glass and windows. Semi-skilled, skilled, and you'll need professional jobs, the supervisory jobs. Then we have to take the entire electricity grid of Belgium, which is old, decayed, servo-mechanical like every other country, transform it into a digital electricity internet. Who's going to lay out the underground cable? Where is the professional talent that's going to put in the advanced meters and the new technologies for a smart Internet of Things? This is jobs. Robots don't do this. They don't. AI doesn't do this. This requires millions of people to lay this out over 2 generations. Semi-skilled, skilled, professional work. Finally, we have to take the entire transport corridor of this country and move it from dumb to smart: road, rail, water, and air. Who's going to put in thousands of charging stations? Who's going to put in all the sensors? So this can be done, and let me say this isn't theoretical. Here's what's interesting you should hear here. We have 3 test regions now in place, and as Smart Europe rolls out, we're calling, and Mr. Sefcovic will tell you this, on every country in Europe to do this. We have 3 test regions. And so we're now in northern industrial France, Haute France. They border you. They border Wallonia, and they border Flanders, right? And we're in our 4th year of deployment. This is the old coal mining, steel, auto, all losing their young people, no employment. 4 years into this deployment, we've got 900 projects. We got the universities organized, and the high schools are organized, and the businesses are organized, and the coal miners' sons have been trained to retrofit buildings and put in solar. Just go visit it. It was picked as the entrepreneurial region of the 350 regions in Europe. And delegations are coming from all over the world. They border you. Then we've just finished a plan with the 23 cities from Rotterdam to The Hague. And they now are moving to deployment. We finished the plan this year. They're moving to deployment. They border you on the north. Then we just finished Luxembourg for the Vice Prime Minister, Etienne Schneider, along with hundreds and hundreds of people in there on their side. They border you on the east. And here's Belgium in the middle. These are the regions that are going to create the nucleus for Smart Europe and the flagship for a new world. And now we want Belgium in the game, because they all border you, and we have to Wi-Fi this across borders. You get a lot of your energy from these other places. You have your mobility, your businesses that join each other. This is the revolution. And if those 3 regions can do it, you can absolutely do it. Because this region and this country, Wallonia was a power in the first industrial revolution, Flanders in the second industrial revolution. You've got the cultural DNA to make this happen. You should be in the center of this circle so that you can move Smart Europe forward. And the real winner here is the planet. And I want to tell you, we're all scared to death about climate change. We thought we had more time. I began working on energy issues in 1973. We thought we had more time. We are now really scared. We are in an extinction event. This isn't just a fun conversation. We need this generation to move forward quickly. And now that we've seen 3 regions can do it, we know anybody can do it. But let me say, it isn't just about the technology. Technology just enables. I'm not a fatalist. I'm not a Silicon Valley utopian. I don't even believe in utopias. I think they're dangerous. But what I will say to you is we have to change consciousness. The technology's there, but the journey depends on us. Are we going to democratize this revolution, let everybody be a player, or will it be controlled by a handful of folks? We have to have a social and political movement. And here's why I'm cautiously hopeful. I'm going to end with a couple of stories. If you really want to see the shift that's going on, watch how parents provide toys for their children. And then you'll really see the revolution. Traditionally, a parent will bring home a toy and say to their 8-year-old daughter, Santa Claus didn't bring this toy. We bought this at a store. We paid money, and now it's your toy, so it's your property. It's not your brother's toy. You remember this conversation? It's not your sister's toy. It's your toy, so you have to take care of it, right? So what's the first thing you heard when you were 8 years old? Not Santa Claus, my parents. And the second thing you heard is not my brother and sister's toy. That's pretty important, because now you have power, you have status, you have property, and you're never going to let them use the toy unless you get something in return. Now, does everybody in? All right. Now we got a generation of millennial parents in their late 20s and 30s, and they're going on toy websites that are sharing. So you pay one subscription, then you can get any toy by age category and bring it back to their kids, and within a few years, the drone will bring them back. Drones, Amazon, they're working on it right now. Within 4 years, we already have the drones. They're already operational. China has one. The drone will pick it up, powered by renewable energy at near zero marginal cost, nobody in the drone, and deliver it to your home. That's starting in the next 4 years. Zero marginal cost. Then the parents are giving the toy to the 8-year-old daughter and they're saying, another little child played with this toy and had a lot of fun. She took good care of it because she knew one day you'd want to play with a toy and have a lot of fun. You take good care of it because one day another kid's going to want to play with a toy and have a lot of fun. What these children are learning is a toy is not a possession to defend. It's not power. It's not status. It's not negotiable. It's simply having the joy of an experience for a moment of time, then let someone else have it. They're learning the circular economy, that we share what we do produce, we share over and over and over, so we make less, share more, and nothing has to go to the landfill. That's the revolution. So I'm going to end with 3 things. What I'm noticing, and I want the millennials especially, you make your judgment call on this to see if I'm saying something that resonates or not with you. What I'm saying here is that I'm starting to see a change in the way millennials consider 3 basic features of consciousness. How we think about freedom, number 1. How we think about power, number 2. And how we think about identity to community, number 3. Yeah, this is just starting, but it's a real revolution. Freedom. My generation and generations before me, we believe freedom is the ability to be independent, self-sufficient, autonomous, not beholden to others, an island to ourselves, right? I don't tell you what to do. You don't tell me to do. I become my own independent, autonomous agent. So for us, freedom was exclusivity, the right to be the king or queen of our castle. But for a millennial generation that grew up on the internet, this idea that freedom is autonomy is death. If I took away the smartphones of every millennial in this room for 48 hours, you would be in withdrawal. You'd be in therapy. I know it. You'd be in tears, even if you're 18 years old. Because for you, freedom is not exclusivity, it's inclusivity. It's not ownership as important as access. It's the ability to be in network after network with your friends so that each day, part of the day you can flourish to the extent that you're valuing the network with your own contribution and the network's valuing you, right? That freedom is quite different. Freedom as inclusivity and access, not exclusivity and ownership. It's a revolution. You have a really weird idea about power for us. We always thought that power was a pyramid, from the 1 to the many, the 1% to the 99%. Power goes from the top down. But for a generation growing up on the internet, where you're used to collaborating with each other, and you're used to sharing everything from your schoolwork to your gaming to your sporting to all of that, for you, power is not vertical, it's lateral. To the extent that you're part of network after network, you benefit the network, your own social capital increases. That's a revolution in how you think about power. We'll have to actually change all the constitutions of every country in the world. You have a different idea about community, and this I'll close with this. I grew up in a geopolitical world, post-Westphalia, the nation state. And in this world, every citizen here is a sovereign agent. You're a citizen of your country and you're a sovereign to yourself. And every sovereign citizen engages in competition with every other sovereign citizen for scarce resources in the marketplace, right? Zero-sum game, winners, losers. Nation states are sovereign. They represent all their individual citizens, and then they compete with other nations for scarce resources in the marketplace or the battlefield. Zero-sum game. Can anyone here in this room today in Belgium tell me how we're going to address climate change, bring the human race together, steward our fellow creatures, and learn to live on this planet with that geopolitical worldview? Anybody? We've got 16-year-olds coming home from school, 15-year-olds, and they're saying to their parents, they got biosphere consciousness. How many of you millennials know what the biosphere is? The biosphere. The biosphere is the 19 kilometers from the stratosphere to the water, where the chemistry of the planet interacts with the biology of the planet to maintain life. 19 kilometers. We've got 15-year-olds coming home and saying to their parents, why is Dad using so much water while he's shaving? We have drought. Save the water. Why is the television on in that room? We haven't been in that room for 3 weeks. Save the electricity. It's ruining the planet. Too much global warming emissions. They're saying to their parents, why 2 cars? That second car hasn't been used in 6 months. Let's car share one. They're saying to their parents. Here's the one I'm most fond of. Brings a smile to my wife and I. I don't know if it's happening here, but it's happening in a lot of countries. They're coming home, they're saying, where'd that hamburger, that piece of beef come from on the plate? Where'd it come from? Because they know that some of that beef comes from a rainforest. And in order to graze the cows, they have to destroy all those trees in the rainforest for 6 inches of topsoil to graze that cow for that piece of beef that's sitting on the plate. And they know that when they destroy those trees in that rainforest to graze the cow, there are rare species of animals that only live in that tropical forest, extinction. And if the trees are no longer there because you're grazing the cow for the piece of beef, those trees can't absorb CO2 from industrial emissions. That's what trees do. That means the temperature of the planet goes up. That means a subsistence farmer, perhaps in Africa, cannot feed her children because she's getting spring floods and summer droughts and wildfires because of the hamburger. The kids are learning ecological footprint, that everything we do in real time affects the well-being of some other human, some other animal, some other ecosystem, the planet. This is not theoretical. We will only survive as we learn that our indivisible community is the biosphere. We don't have to give up national ties and tribal affiliations or religious affiliations, but our indivisible community is the biosphere, and our well-being is intimately affected by that, and you can be the richest person in the world. You will not escape climate change. So here's what my mission I put forth. Here in Flanders, tomorrow morning, bring together the Chamber of Commerce, bring together the region, the government, bring together the universities and high schools, bring together the civil society, and begin to create an economic roadmap, a digital third industrial revolution. And build out this construction site so the young people here start to wean themselves into the new opportunities, the new employment by building out this infrastructure across the region. Connect with Wallonia, connect with Flanders, connect with the Brussels region, and then cross-border. We're waiting for you. We're on your border in the south in northern France. We're on your border on the north in the Netherlands. We're on your border on the east in Luxembourg. But now, without you, we can't create this virtuous circle. So tomorrow morning, start this exercise so that here, a whole generation in this region becomes the flagship and the lighthouse, not only for Smart Europe, but for Smart World. So when your grandchildren look back at you in 2060 or 2070, they can say, you did the right thing. You didn't just become cynical or resigned or just go back to business as usual and just play on Facebook all day, but you actually use this new technology to begin to save our species and save our ecosystems and save our planet. I cannot imagine, if we don't do this, what it'll be like for your children and grandchildren 20 or 30 years from now here. So the opportunity is there, grasp it. The moment is here, seize it. Tomorrow morning, get together with your government leaders, your business leaders, and young people, and move this project forward to create smart Belgium, smart Europe, smart world. Thank you.